Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, joined by my incredible co-host, Cody Sizemore. And we are here today to talk to you about something that we've talked about in the past, but we know it always is good to revisit some really great gold mines. And I believe that this is one of those. Before we do that, though, we just wanted to say thank you again for tuning in. We had a really great conversation last week with one of our listeners, and I just think it was really cool that we were able to do that. And we didn't mention it last week, but I just want to encourage anyone who's listening today, if you liked that format and you would like to maybe be a part of something like that in the future, reach out to us because I think it was actually pretty fun. So of course, where we met her and where we get to communicate with all of you is in our Facebook group. So we encourage you to join our Facebook group. It is the Financial Coaches Facebook group or community by New Money Habits. So we would love to see you there. And Cody, what I'd like to talk to you about today, if we may, is the stages of change. And I know that we've talked about this before. I think it's been a little while since we've done that, so this shouldn't be too repeat for anybody. But I just want to give you a little bit of background and let you know that this is something that I learned way back in the day. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when I was in school, and it's intended for the provider of services. So like in that case, it was counselors. In our case, it's coaches. But it was really intended to be information for the provider. Now, I kind of went a little bit rogue because that's what I like to do. And I actually, when I was dealing with clients, I was sharing this information with them. And I think part of that really just comes from my belief, I guess, that knowledge can be power and it is empowering for people. And when it was kind of given to us as information for us to just use, it kind of felt like, yeah, it's great that I can, I guess, analyze where my clients are at, but it felt kind of weird knowing this information and not sharing it with them. And so that's what I did. I just started sharing it with them. Well, then, fast forward probably a decade or two. And as I was getting into financial coaching, I brought that idea right into it. And I just said, I want to share this with my clients. And then when I joined up with Mike and Nino for New Money Habits, I shared it with them. And then as we brought clients in, you being one of them, I started sharing it with them. And I just love the idea that right now, that's something that you like, you use, and you share with your clients as well. And so I just wanted our listeners to know about the way that has unfolded, because it really has been, like I said, me just going rogue a little bit and wondering if it's going to be beneficial. And here we are all these years later, and it absolutely is changing not just the way I coach individuals, but the way at least you do as well. And maybe even some of the listeners who have heard us way back and however many episodes ago when we brought it up. So for that reason, I think it'd be a really good idea to revisit it and maybe just talk a little bit about how using that with our clients not only gives them immense benefit, but also allows us to just basically continue to work with them for as long as they're getting value from us.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that, like you mentioned, I learned from you, and I took a lot from it. So much so that, like you mentioned, I incorporate this into my coaching program as well, and I make it something that, like, no matter who I'm working with, at some point we're going to discuss this, because I think it's really, really important. So I think that probably the thing that we should start off with is just explaining like what these different stages of change are. So I'll go ahead and kind of get into that. So essentially the stages of change, there's 6 different stages of change, and I'll kind of unpack one by one in the order that they tend to happen. So the first stage of change would be something called pre-contemplation. Now, what pre-contemplation kind of looks like is that someone's aware that there's a problem, but it's not painful enough, or they don't really care about it enough to really do anything about it. So for example, this might be if someone is, getting ready for their day in the morning and they're looking in the mirror and they're like, I'm getting a little bit more chunky than I really want. And then they have that initial thought and then they go, well, that's okay. I'll get to it eventually. I'm still loving my pizza, kind of thing. That is pre-contemplation. You're noticing something, but you're not really doing anything about it. So you go from stage 1, which would be pre-contemplation.
Before you move on to that, I just want to add real quick that sometimes people who are in pre-contemplation also don't even realize there's a problem.
That too.
So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, go ahead.
That too. Good little insight there. But you go from stage 1 into stage 2, which is going from pre-contemplation into something called simply contemplation. And this is where you're just starting to really consider potentially making some sort of change. Now, you haven't done anything about it quite yet. You haven't, decided when you're going to do anything. It's just kind of like, I'm really starting to consider it, right? And that's what, contemplation kind of looks like. Then we go from stage 2 into stage 3, which would be going from contemplation into something called preparation. And preparation is where you've made the decision that you want to make a change, but you haven't really done anything quite yet about it. You're just kind of getting ready. So maybe it's something that you're mentally preparing yourself for. Maybe it's something that you're physically preparing your surroundings with. Maybe it's a point to where like you're starting to watch YouTube videos about making this change, or listen to podcasts or reading books about this. You're gathering this information and you're just kind of getting ready to make this change. And that's stage number 3. And then we go from stage 3 to stage 4, which is going from preparation into something called action. And this is where you take like that first initial step to make that change happen, right? So for example, looking at preparation and action for maybe a potential client, and this is just one scenario. I want to preface this. This is one scenario that they might see this kind of transition, is that maybe preparation is when they start Googling what is financial coaching, or maybe you have a free online event, like a webinar or something like that. And that's them starting to get ready. They're looking into things, they're in preparation. And then the client being in action would be maybe when they book that first initial consultation with you. That's the first time that they're actually doing something about it to really get the help that they need and to make the change that they want. Or they could be in action when they decide to move forward with your program and officially become a client. And that's basically what action looks like. You're taking that first step to make this change happen. And then you go from stage 4 into stage 5, which is something called maintenance. And maintenance is when someone is doing the things that they need to do consistently over a period of time in order to make this change actually happen. So maybe that looks like showing up to your coaching meetings. Maybe that looks like doing their budget. Maybe that looks like having, sit down money unity meetings with their spouse on a weekly basis. Maybe that looks like, looking at different areas that don't really align with their values and their spending and moving away from those and putting new values or new areas of spending that do align with their values into action there. So that's kind of like the maintenance side of things. Maybe they're trying to pay off debt. They're working their debt snowball, whatever sort of process that you teach. That's what maintenance kind of looks like. And really, the action and maintenance is really where we want people to be and to be there for the longest period of time, because that's where a lot of the change really does happen. However, I will say that there is a 6th stage of change, and that is simply something called relapse. And that one's a little bit self-explanatory, right? So if we're talking to our clients, and we're helping with their finances, something like that would be, maybe a financial relapse kind of thing. And that's where they kind of fall off the wagon, or, they start, returning to old habits or old mindsets, old behaviors, stuff like that. And you go into a financial relapse. So those are the 6 different stages of change. Now, here's the thing that I think is really important to recognize about these stages of change. A few things. Number one is that once someone goes into a full out relapse, it's very difficult to go from relapse straight back into maintenance. It's very difficult because if we think about it, if someone were to have a financial relapse, and let's just say that everything goes out the window, the very first thing that someone's likely going to experience is that they're probably going to be upset with themselves. And they're probably going to say something along the lines of like, oh, I know I messed up. I know this is a problem again, but honestly, I don't even want to deal with this right now. And that's pre-contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're probably going to go, well, maybe I should, which is contemplation. Then they're going to go, all right, I'm going to get things ready, preparation, and so on and so forth. So you'll have to go through the whole thing again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the good news is that oftentimes, and I don't want to say every time, but oftentimes, once you go through this cycle once, it tends to go a little bit faster the second time and a little bit faster the third time. So that's the good news. But, that's what the different stages of change are. That's how they kind of behave and all that good jazz. So before I go any further, Maria, I know that you're itching.
I'm smiling over here because I'm like, well, you were taught well and you are teaching others well. And this is fantastic. There are a couple of things I would just throw on there. One, I love the fact that you recognize that, there's probably no hard, fast rule to this, but I would venture to say you can't physically go backward to maintenance once you have that relapse because of what you just said. We do cycle through the changes, even if it's just mentally, even if it's very quickly. But oftentimes it goes faster. Not only that, but the faster we get through that, and the more often we get through that, the longer the maintenance period tends to be. So I know you mentioned we kind of want to stay in that maintenance as long as we can. That like when you're creating any new habit, that might not be as long at the beginning before the relapse, but then that will continue to hopefully get to be longer and longer and longer, and your relapses fewer and further between. So that's one thing. Another thing I just want to throw out there, and this is just something I have identified and observed while working with a number of people, and it's that the difference between that preparation and action, and you started to touch on it really well, but I want to just bring some light to it. I think so often, Cody, myself included, and human beings in general, when we're kind of worried about something or we're scared of taking massive action on something, we tend to spend a lot of time in preparation, and it's doing these little things that feel to us like action. And if other people are looking on at what we're doing, they're like, oh, look at you taking that first step. And I'm using air quotes right now because I think you actually use the words taking your first step. And I think a lot of times while you like to think about that as being in action, I would almost argue that that's probably more preparatory. So for example, when we have, when we buy a course, I just spoke with somebody the other day who her thing is, I'm very, very interested in changing. I've bought this course, I've bought this course, I've bought this course, and none of the courses have been what they need to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, it seems like you're in action. And so when that's the case, it's very easy to say, well, the courses weren't right, but really she wasn't taking real action on her own, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just want to point that out because I think that can be one of those areas where as coaches, we might miss it if we're not really in tune with what our clients are doing. And as clients, I've been a client before. As a client, it's very tempting to say, oh, I'm totally in action. What do you mean I'm not taking action? I've taken these steps. And it's like, no, I'm absolutely fooling myself. I'm totally preparing right now. So there's no good or bad. It's just the idea of, okay, recognize where you are so that you don't think, well, now that I've done this thing and I've been doing it for 2 weeks, I'm totally in maintenance, man. No, you're not. Like you're basically doing action. So don't try to rush yourself through these stages. Other than that, fantastic job on sharing all of those. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't try and rush yourselves or convince yourself that you're in a different stage than what you actually are. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's important for both the coach and the client to know.
That's
super important.
That's right.
So, yeah. So if it's okay with you, Maria, I think that what I would like to do is kind of share when I have that meeting with the clients, how I actually turn this whole conversation around the stages of change to not just be something that's just like an information kind of bust, but actually turn it into something that can almost be like a tool
Yeah.
for people to use in some way.
No, I think that's perfect. In fact, my question to you was going to be, how have you seen this benefit your clients? And so I think if you start with where you want to start, it will eventually get to where I'm asking anyway. So yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So when I've talked to clients about this, what I've done in the past is I've filled them in on those different stages of change. I basically did exactly what I just did with you. And then from there, I say, okay, so now that we know this, I would like to do a little bit of an exercise. That the end goal is to have it turn into a tool that you can use to help you with these different stages of change as you go through them. So what I would do is I would put a main focus on the relapse side of things. Because oftentimes when I have this conversation with people, we're probably a few months into it, if not even closer to the end of our initial kind of program. So, more often than not, they're in that action and or maintenance kind of stage, which means that the next natural step for them will be to have some form of a financial relapse kind of thing. So that's why I want to put the focus on that one. So I tell them that, and then I tell them I have 4 questions for you, and they're all going to center around this relapse situation, and as well as also the different stages of change as well. But really the relapse is the main focus. And I would just ask them, number 1 is, for you specifically, what would a financial relapse look like? How would you identify that you might be in a financial relapse kind of thing? And they would tell me certain things like, oh, well, maybe I won't be using the budget. Maybe I'll be turning back to the credit cards. Maybe I'll be overspending. I won't be communicating with my spouse, like all the different types of things, right? But knowing what it looks like or how to identify it, that's really important. So that's one question I would ask them. Then once I have all their answers, I would repeat back what they said, and I would say, okay, so now we know what this might look like. Let's pretend like it all happened. And it's the worst case scenario, like it's a full-blown financial relapse. How will this affect you personally, mentally, emotionally, with your marriage, with your kids, like all different types of things? Like, how would this affect you, right? And then they'll share all of the things as to how it would affect them. And most of them are not very good, right? So I get all that information, and then I repeat back to them, what would it look like and how would it affect you? And I say, let's pretend that all that happened too. And if all that happened, the third question would be, how would you handle this? What are the things that you would do in order to work through those earlier stages of change and get yourself back into that place of action and maintenance? What are the things that you would actually do to help you get there? And they give me a list for that as well. And then I go one more layer deeper, and I say, this final question is similar to the previous question, which is how would you handle it or what would you do? But I feel like it peels back another layer. And the layer would be this. What are the things that you feel are going to help you or bring you the most value in order to do the things that you need to do in order to handle it? So things like that, some of the, popular responses that I get, one would be accountability. Another one would be communication with your spouse. Another one might be revisiting their why statements. Just stuff like that, right? Those aren't things that, you would necessarily do per se, but maybe they just bring you a lot of value in order to do the things that you need to more effectively, kind of thing. So those are the 4 questions that I would ask them. And then once I get through everything with them, I run through it all one more time. And I basically tell them, here's why we did this, and here's how we can use this moving forward. The reason why we did this is because we now know what this potential relapse is going to look like. We now know how it's going to affect you. We now know how you're going to handle it. And we now know the things that are going to bring you the most value in order to handle it. So what we just did was we essentially created a blueprint for you to where, like, we don't need to wait for all of these identifiers to just all happen. We don't need to wait for that. all we have to do is we just have to recognize that if even one of them happens, we can be like, whoa, hold on. I see what's happening here. And I know that if I don't address this now, I know what this can snowball into in like a direction that we don't want to see happen. And if that happens, I also know how this is going to affect me. And I really don't want that. So before any of that happens, I'm going to lean into the things I need to do in order to handle this. And I'm also going to lean into the things that are going to bring me the most value or help me the most. So that way I can just stay one step ahead of this relapse for as long as I can and prolong the amount of time that we're in this action and maintenance, and lessen the amount of time or possibly even avoid a relapse in the first place, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the tool of this, right? Like we can use this as like a blueprint kind of things where it's like, hey, we have all the things we know that it's going to look like, how it's going to affect us, what we need to do, and what we need to lean into as well. And having that conversation with people, it has brought immense value to them. Immense, especially if they're towards the end of your program and they're considering going off on their own, or they're considering staying with you for a little bit longer. It just gives them that perspective of here's what's coming and here's what I need to do in order to keep going, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things. One, I really appreciate that you're arming your clients with knowledge. And it's kind of how, how I started the top of this episode, that's why I started sharing it with them anyway, just understanding the information that's behind all of this. But you took it a step further and you are arming them with the understanding and almost the expectation that this is going to happen. You're not telling them it's 100% going to happen, but it's 100% going to happen. It just, it does. That's just the way it is. So you're arming them with that knowledge and also preemptively arming them with the best way to defend themselves against that knowledge. I would add a question. I know you didn't ask my opinion. I'm going to offer it anyway.
Open to it.
It's the Sicilian in me. The one piece that I didn't hear and I think would just really, really help arm them even more than you already are, is to ask them some version of what led up to that relapse. So you've asked them, assume it already happened. How would you react? You went forward with all of it. But when we're talking about really arming ourselves with knowledge and understanding, we want to prepare ourselves for what are those triggers, for lack of a better word, that are going to lead up to us falling off the wagon. And so even if you're doing it in this scenario where it's almost like hypothetical and you're just like, have them think about, okay, so all of this happened to you. What led to it? And it could be something that's in their imagination, like they can just imagine it, but they know their lives well enough that they might say, oh, well, there was a death in the family or whatever it is. They're going to give you insights that you, even though have worked with them for months at the time, might not have already uncovered. And so if they can identify some of those things, then your next step can be, when those things happen, how do you use that? And I think honestly, the stuff that you were talking about, I think it was your fourth question, accountability, communication with spouse, etc. Those things can actually be utilized in that trigger time in order to avoid the relapse altogether. And the reason I throw all this out there is because the whole purpose of any of this is obviously arming them with knowledge, but also our mistakes create knowledge for us. If we don't learn from them, then they're wasted. And so we as coaches want to help our clients recognize that when there is a slip up, there is also a lesson. And we want to preemptively help them discover what that lesson might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. I actually wrote down that question so I can integrate it into my next time I talk to someone about this. I talked about this with someone this morning, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure when the next time will be, but I'm sure it'll be probably within the next month or so.
Awesome.
And I'll definitely be incorporating that one as well. What led up to the relapse? I think that's a really important layer to uncover as well. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're doing great work.
I want to end with this. We've talked a lot about how talking about this with our clients, how it can really benefit them, whether it be with arming them with knowledge, whether it be, arming them with the expectation that like, hey, maybe you thought that this would never happen, but newsflash, it's probably going to happen at some point. It could be next month. It could be next year. It could be 3 years from now. We don't know when it's going to happen, but the likelihood of it is high that it's probably going to happen in some way, shape, or form kind of thing. So it's important to, have this conversation for the client's benefit. But I also think it's worth noting that having this conversation can also be a benefit to the coach as well on many different levels. One being that, hey, you're arming your clients with this. And, having that kind of like expectation is good because if they go through some sort of relapse, especially while they're working with you, they're not going to be left with questions like, well, why is this happening? Aren't you supposed to help me? It's like, no, like we discussed this, like this is normal kind of thing, right? And now we just need to work through it. So that's one thing that it can benefit the coach is because you're already giving that kind of like preface of, hey, you should expect this kind of thing. On the flip side, though, oftentimes, like when you get to that, there's questions about like what would bring you the most value or what would help you. One of the most frequent answers that I get from people would be that accountability or that guidance side of things. So that kind of just like, it plants a little bit of a seed in their brain to where they're like, you know what, maybe having that for a longer period of time while I'm getting these practices and new mindsets and stuff like that really cemented into my life, maybe that would be beneficial. And that can be beneficial to the coach because let's say you have a 6-month program, you talk with them about this in months 4, 5, or 6, and then they see the value of, I think I want to keep going as well to really, really cement this in through that accountability, through that guidance, through that support. So it could potentially even be something to where like, you're able to work with the clients that you have a little bit longer as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all, especially if it's something that they see value in as well. So that's just the last thing I felt like it was important for me to say around this. And
well, if I may, I would just also say that I know you mentioned that sometimes you wait until you're close to the end of working with them in order to bring some of this up. I'm just going to say that sometimes I bring it up like way at the beginning. Sometimes I don't necessarily go through in as much detail as what you just did, but I absolutely will allude to these stages. And I do that so that people understand what to expect. And it kind of helps to manage their expectations for coaching results in the first place. A lot of times people are like, so we're going to be together for like a month or two, right? And then my life is going to be awesome. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. So just being able to give them this tried and true framework for understanding how change actually takes place helps them to manage not just their expectations of me and how I'm working with them, but it allows them to give themselves some grace as well and recognize that this does take some time. And like you said, it does plant those seeds so that we can then reference them at any given time and even ask them, hey, just out of curiosity, what stage are you thinking you're in right now? Because it gives them a language around which to speak about some of these things that they probably didn't have when they started working with you. So,
yeah, really good point. Really good point. And I mean, the benefit of doing it early is there for sure. So, if you're thinking about integrating this, you don't need to wait until the end or anything like that. Do it when you feel is the right time. Because again, the value is there. The value is there. So
cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for talking with me about this.
Yeah, not a problem, Maria. Not a problem. So with that being said, I do want to close out with giving a little bit of a shout out to someone. This person is an every weeker, and I've actually spoken with this person on the phone via text a couple times as well. And he actually popped into our Facebook group not too long ago, maybe about a week or so ago, and just kind of shared that, he got some value from one of the episodes and all that kinds of stuff. So I just felt like I wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out. That person would be Langdon Barnes. He's a great guy. He, has a really good heart. He's in it for the right reasons. And, I just want to say thank you for your continued support of being an every weeker. And we appreciate you, man. So, and if there's anyone else that wants a shout out, let us know. Let us know in the Facebook group. Again, that is the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. And until then, thanks for chiming in for this week. We'll catch you guys next week for another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.